Sri Lanka, earlier Ceylon, island nation lying in the Indian Ocean and isolated from peninsular India by the Palk Strait. It is situated between latitude 5 degrees 55 and 9 degrees 51 N and longitude 79 degrees 41 and 81 degrees 53 E and has a most extreme length of 432 kilometers and a greatest width of 224 kilometers. Closeness to the Indian subcontinent has encouraged close social association between Sri Lanka and India from antiquated occasions. At a junction of sea courses navigating the Indian Ocean, Sri Lanka has likewise been presented to social impacts from other Asian civic establishments. Antiquated Greek geographers called it Taprobane. Bedouins alluded to it as Serendib. Later European mapmakers called it Ceylon, a name actually utilized every so often for exchange purposes. It authoritatively became Sri Lanka in 1972. The particular human progress of Sri Lanka, with roots that can be followed back to the 6th century BCE, is portrayed by two factors. The safeguarding of Theravada Buddhism, the conventional school of Buddhism having its scholarly customs in the Pali language, and the advancement more than 2 centuries of a refined arrangement of water system in the drier pieces of the nation. This development was additionally enhanced by the impacts of Hinduism and Islam. In 1948, after almost 150 years of British principle, Sri Lanka turned into a free nation, and it was admitted to the United Nations 7 years after the fact. The nation is an individual from the Commonwealth and the South Asian Association for Regional Cooperation. Colombo, which arose as the primary metropolitan place during British principle, remains the leader and legal capital of Sri Lanka. Sri Jayawardenepura Kota, a Colombo suburb, is the administrative capital. For regulatory purposes, the nation has been partitioned into 9 areas and partitioned into 25 locales. Sri Lanka is thickly populated. Most of its kin are living in rustic territories and rely upon agribusiness for their job. An actual climate of wide-running variety makes Sri Lanka one of the world's most grand nations. As the home of a few ethnic gatherings, each with its own social legacy, Sri Lanka additionally has a profoundly differed social scene. A generally 3-sided precipitous territory known as the Central Highlands involves the south focal area of Sri Lanka and is the core of the nation. This good country mass is encircled by a different plain, the overall height of which goes from ocean level to around 1,000 feet 300 meters. This plain records for around 5/6 of the nation's all-out zone. The Central Highlands have an exceptionally analyzed landscape comprising of an extraordinary game plan of levels, edges, ledges, intermontane bowls, and valleys. Sri Lanka's most noteworthy mountains, Piduru Talagala at 8,281 feet 2,524 meters, Kirigalpota at 7,858 feet, and Adams Peak Sri Pada at 7,559 feet, are found around there. The good countries, besides on their western and southwestern flanks, are forcefully characterized by a progression of ledges, the most awesome being the purported World's End, a close vertical incline of around 4,000 feet. The plain that encompasses the Central Highlands doesn't have a completely level and featureless territory. Toward the north and upper east of the good countries, the plain is crossed by low edges that decline in height as they approach the coast. The western and southwestern pieces of the plain element rotating edges and valleys running corresponding to the coast and expanding in height toward the inside to blend impalpably with the good country mass. Somewhere else the levelness of the plain is irregularly hindered by rough buttes and hills, some of which arrive at heights of in excess of 1,000 feet. The plain is bordered by a coast comprising generally of sandy seashores, spits, and tidal ponds. Over a couple of stretches of the coast there are rough projections and precipices, profound water straits, and seaward islets. Topographically, the island of Sri Lanka is viewed as a southerly expansion of peninsular India, the Deccan, with which it shares a mainland rack and a portion of its fundamental lithologic and geomorphic qualities. Hard, translucent stone arrangements, for example, rock gneisses, condylite, a sort of transformative stone, and quartzite, make up around 9/10 of the island's surface and subsurface. The surface waste of Sri Lanka is comprised of around 100 waterways, the vast majority of which are simple wet season streams. 12 significant streams represent around 75% of the mean yearly waterway release of the nation, with those that stream altogether through the wet zone, the good countries and the southwestern piece of the nation, conveying about a large portion of the absolute release. Except for the 208-mile-long Mahaweli River, all significant waterways stream radially from the Central Highlands to the ocean. The Mahaweli, which starts on the western slants of the most elevated territories of the good countries, follows a roaming course in its upper scopes before it enters the plain toward the east of the high countries and afterwards streams toward the upper east coast, since a piece of its catchment is well inside the wet zone. This stream has a bigger and less occasionally shifted stream than the other dry zone waterways, as is a significant resource for water system in the drier pieces of the nation. The dry zone incorporates the northern piece of the nation and a large part of the east and southeast. Varieties of soil inside Sri Lanka mirror the impacts of atmosphere, lithology, and landscape on the dirt-shaping cycles. The climatic impacts are reflected in the predominance of red-yellow podzolic soils, filtered lateritic soils, in the wet zone and of rosy earthy-colored earths, non-lateritic loamy soils, in the dry zone. In pieces of the Central Highlands there are rosy earthy-colored latosolic soils, halfway laterized soils, or youthful earthy-colored topsoils, clayey soils. Among the other significant soil types are the alluvials that happen along the lower courses of waterways and the regosols, sandy soils, of the waterfront plots. The majority of the dirts of Sri Lanka are possibly reasonable for some sort of farming use. Nonetheless, consumption of the regular fruitfulness of the dirt has happened broadly, particularly on the rough landscape of the good countries, inferable from helpless soil preservation. Sri Lanka's tropical area guarantees perpetually high temperatures with month-to-month midpoints between 22 degrees Celsius and 33 degrees Celsius in the swamps. In the Central Highlands, higher elevations represent lower temperatures with month-to-month midpoints between 7 degrees Celsius and 21.6 degrees Celsius. Precipitation is the prominent factor in the occasional and diurnal varieties of the atmosphere of Sri Lanka. Most pieces of the nation get a normal yearly precipitation of in excess of 50 inches 1,270 millimeters. Notwithstanding provincial contrasts in the measure of downpour, its irregularity and its changeability and adequacy have framed the premise of a qualification in Sri Lanka between a wet zone and a dry zone. In the previous territory, which covers the southwestern quadrant of the island, counting the good countries, the precipitation is weighty. Yearly midpoints range from 98 crores along the coast to in excess of 150 creeps in the high countries, and occasionally very much disseminated, albeit a larger piece of the downpour comes from the southwest storm from May to September. Precipitation goes astray moderately minimal every year from the yearly midpoints and is viable enough to keep up soil dampness and surface waste consistently. Over the remainder of the island, the dry zone, yearly sums of downpour range from 30 to 70 creeps in the various territories, a lot of it being gotten during the Upper East storm season from November to January. Dry seasons that persevere for over a quarter of a year are normal.